The Passion of Paris Saint-Germain is the central church of perhaps one of the most prestigious central areas opposite the Marais, on the other side of the River Seine. Auteuil and Boulogne are other salubrious parts of France, slightly outside the centre. To the northwest, the recently renovated, colourful Church of Saint-Germain rivals Notre Dame in its own way, but there's rivalries inside the Paris Saint-Germain stadium beyond all passions of any other football club in Europe, really. But the passions are often directed at other sections of their own home audience. Expensive players that aren't performing. Paris Saint-Germain supporters have been known to protest before. They've won the French national championships, but left 5 minutes before the end of the game when they know they've got enough points and the team aren't making the effort. The stadium empty 5 minutes before the end of the game. There's a similar issue with the France-Israel game. Paris Saint-Germain use the national stadium Parc des Princes. Paris Saint-Germain is the essence of the French national team. The boycott process of the France-Israel game seems to have started. When there's ticket sales, a lot of those sold ticket owners don't turn up. But in a big national stadium, it's only going to be a quarter full. Only a quarter of the seats have been sold. And there's twice as many police, gendarmes, military-trained people on duty as compared to usual. It's very likely to turn into a damp squib, very similar to the French Olympics opening ceremony where there were more gendarmes than fans. There has been a France-Israel away game, not in Israel itself, but in Hungary. Now, Hungarian football fans can be a bit mental, but then so can their government. That game was played in an empty stadium, like it was COVID. Days. I will give a mention to Israel football fans. There was some trouble in Holland, the Netherlands I should call it, recently, whereby Israeli fans were being a bit, well, they were acting like they were at home. The Dutch head of the police said there was violence on both sides, but it was provocative violence initially that started it all. Vandalism and ethnic assaults. And then the local Dutch team fans got retaliatory. Now, in Holland, it was the Tel Aviv team. The Tel Aviv team in Israel is the more socialist, moderate team. It's the Jerusalem team that's the ultra-Zionist, violent supporters. You have to remember that all these people have had to do national service in the Israeli military. Netanyahu has since drawn up a plan with Mossad for away games. So undoubtedly Jerusalem fans will be travelling to Paris to support Israel against France. So what to expect in and around the stadium? Well, though the names of rich areas, the prices of tickets for football games has made a huge difference to how many people attend and who attend. There are the collectif ultras, there are the Ultras Auteuil, there have been the boulogne boys. These are essentially gangs, hooligan gangs. And they've had to be separated into separate parts of the Parc des Princes stadium for their own safety. The Auteuil have been the more normal group. If you see any skull and crossbones flags, these are the most undesirables. If you see lots of red flares, it's just a way of celebration. Some of the ultras fans journeyed to London to watch an Arsenal game, not able to get in. They created a wild atmosphere with their flares and chanting at an Arsenal five-a-side game nearby. They do have a very respectful, admiring anyway, relationship with Liverpool and Celtic fans. But much more normal Auteuil fans that have been making news in the media by unfurling a huge Free Palestine banner across the whole of their end of the stadium. There's quite a history of big banners, but they are allowed to be political but not offensive. I think it's worth pointing out that being a little offensive isn't the worst thing that happens in and around a Paris. Saint-Germain game. In the past, there's been an Auteuil against Boulogne problem, whereby a small number of Auteuil fans were chased towards their entrance to the stadium by the Boulogne contingent. A large number of Auteuil fans came out of the stadium to support them and attack the Boulogne crowd. This is fans of Paris Saint-Germain, not a different town, a different football team, Boulogne, their own fellow team supporters. Marseille, the other team, Le Classique, the rival derby, as we'd say in English. I'm pausing because it's difficult to believe. So the Auteuil fans are coming out to protect a smaller number of their gang of hooligans, and the Boulogne are coming at them. Apparently, a Boulogne fan came out of a pub and got lynched, hung by the Auteuil fans, and 2 people were arrested and jailed for this. One got off, actually, and the other one got 5 years. Someone died by hanging. There was another incident, and this was supposedly an anti-Jewish motivated attack. Some of those ultra-right-wing skull and crossbones hooligans that have pretty much just got elected as the far-right government in France. A black off-duty police officer tried stepping in to help this Jewish guy that was getting beaten. I say off-duty, he wasn't in uniform, but he did have his gun on him. Why he had a flare or where he got the flare from, I'm not sure, but he tried keeping off a gang with a flare. This didn't really work. This police officer, out of uniform, pulled his gun and shot one of his attackers in a non-fatal way, and then shot and killed another of their attackers. I haven't been able to find any mention of what happened to the police officer. Now, Israelis love destroying symbolism. I have to fear for the recently renovated Saint-Germain church in the centre of Paris, opposite the historically Jewish Marais district in the centre. If the stadiums are so fiercely policed, then it's possible the centre of Paris may be targeted. And the police can't be everywhere anyone decides to show their colours. French and Paris particularly are proud of their multi-racial France and the French. Recently, fans might get kettled, but on a state visit to Israel, Jacques Chirac was kettled by Israeli security forces and really quite lost his rag. A similar sort of Israeli military escort kettling technique was used on Macron when he visited Israel. touching can be a real irritation if you get too much touching, and it's touching more prodding, really. It's goading, isn't it? Then there's the actual invasion of French territory. In 1914, South Africa was a dominion of the British Empire, and as such South Africa sent a lot of troops to fight in the First World War. France is peculiar in that it's kept a lot of colonies by making them part of France itself. French Guiana, which is centre of the European space industry, is attached to the north part of South America, but it's part of France. It's almost the size of France. All the islands of the Caribbean that are French are part of France. All the monasteries and religious sites that France took over before the creation of Israel from the Vatican had been involved with them for 400 years, and essentially since the Crusades. For 150 years, there's several sites in Israel-Palestine that are a French dominion. It's similar to how the gold Dome on the Rock Muslim religious temple in Jerusalem, that small little part of Jerusalem that is Palestinian, was invaded by Israeli special mission military and some Israeli politicians. That was the provocation for the Gaza Hammas invasion of southern Israel and the festival where they took the 1,200 hostages that were then the reason for a retaliation by Israeli IDF forces into Gaza and killing 45,000 women, children and combatants, I suppose, and escalating the settlements of the West Bank, machine gunning Palestinian houses so they leave and stopping them harvesting their crops, generally harassing them day or night as an incentivised hobby by the government. And then they turn to Lebanon. Lebanon has always been a bit of a quiet French protectorate, a former French colony that maintains good trade relationships, and Macron visited when a mysterious bomb went off in a port. Well, it wasn't a bomb, it was just an explosion, wasn't it? Or might have been a consignment of pages that got buzzed all at the same time, making the Volkswagen product recall immaterial. A French politician has called off a visit to one of or two of these French Dominion monasteries in the Holy Land after Israeli authorities have fairly gently invaded and pushed out the French embassy officials from the holy sites. So these French holy sites aren't respected. Might Saint-Germain, another holy site, not be respected by Israelis? Though I think Paris Saint-Germain and French supporters, football supporters, have boycotted the France-Israel game. Ticket sales are likely to have been heavily restricted as well by the French authorities' subtly commanding order. But what will be truly fascinating to see is what provocations are made by Israeli ex-services, fans, towards France and the French, and how is it met? Gendarmes act with top-down commands to control their own people. Israel tends to use all as agents provocateurs and squeal that they're the wounded party afterwards, falsifying evidence or anything that's necessary. But recent insults to the French national government and the interior minister, who refused to go to the French religious sites in the Holy Land because Israel forces wouldn't withdraw after assaulting the staff. It's possible that the gendarmes might be deployed slightly differently in Paris. The mossad and government agents should be known. Settlers travelling to Paris shouldn't be there. Hooligans travelling to Paris should already have been identified. There might be scooter pairings driving around Paris looking for Israelis displaying their colours, But somehow that seems more likely in Marseille, PSG, Paris Saint-Germain's great football rival, with whom there have been clashes in the past. Might poor white, disaffected PSG collectif ultras, former Boulogne boys, who love to bounce up and down rhythmically, thumping their chest with their fist and raising it in a rather Nazi-style flat-palmed salute, singing their anthem to the Village People tune, Go West. Might the ultras not be round? The ultra-Zionist insults to France recently. Might the ultras leave everything to the more diverse Auteuil crowd? My hope is that it's all left on the pitch. It's all resolved there. The previous away game was an easy 4-1 victory to France over Israel, and that's without their two best players. But if you've driven through France during the Gilets jaunes political protests a few years ago, you know how passionate the French can get. Expect passion next week at the Parc des Princes and Paris, more generally. The Parisian people like to be heard, but who the ultra-right-wing Le Pen government is supporting, or perhaps rather tolerating at the moment, is difficult to discern. All national governments are publicly supporting Israel against Palestine, primarily because of historic shame. But it is now Netanyahu's ultra-Zionist state of Israel that is the true dommage. Sports teams are owned by the titans of industry, venture capital billionaires, generational fortunes, heirs, and massive petrostate sovereign wealth funds. Qatar Jerusalem has had a crypto fraudster and an alleged sex trafficker. Another owner money laundering for organised crime through his sushi restaurants. In 2022, Israel elected the most right-wing government in the world. Hungary is not far behind, but in Israel there are a couple of far-right political parties that have actually been banned. I suspect they're just so that they don't divide the vote. These two parties both have people links and advocate all Arabs leaving Israel. A little bit like Donald Trump wanting to have all South Americans and Mexicans leaving America. It wouldn't work because no one wants to do the shitty jobs. Benjamin Netanyahu has a favourite football team, and that football team's ultra supporters have links to the other two far-right parties that have been banned. La Familia is the ultra-right-wing supporters club of Qatar Jerusalem. Yellow and black colours, they've been banned from some games. There is another Jerusalem team, Hapoel. Hapoel is a communist team. They are the epitome of coexistence and cooperation, and owned by the supporters, but more generally, sports teams are owned by the titans of industry, venture capital billionaires, generational fortunes, heirs, and massive petrostate sovereign wealth funds. Qatar Jerusalem has had a crypto fraudster and an alleged sex trafficker. Another owner money laundering for organised crime through his sushi restaurants. $4 billion in unconditional aid from the United States comes into an ultra-right-wing coalition that has a Supreme Court that's been neutered, affecting an apartheid regime and radical pro-settlement. anti-Arab forces, the Beltar Hooligans, who vary in number, depending on who you listen to, from between 100 and 3,000. This Netanyahu's favourite football club are a bit like the stormtroopers to the right-wing political parties. They control who gets hired, as far as players go, to the Beltane Jerusalem team, through tactics like burning down the trophy room and the club's offices when there's any mention of an Arab player being hired. They don't chant the policies of mass expulsion of all Palestinians outside of Israel. They just shout over and over, "Death to Arabs," at every football game, and at other times as well. They've recently invaded a hospital because they heard a false rumour that there was one of the terrorists there. They roam the corridors, destroying stuff, interrupting operations. In mass, they invaded a mall and attacked Arabs that were working in McDonald's. They've also been responsible for a number of armed robberies. Ben Giver, one of the most prominent settlement constructors that's already planning real estate developments in Gaza, regularly turns up to cheer along La Familia and gets cheered right back. In La Familia, there are officers in the army and there are police. Donald Trump moved the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. At this point, Beitar Jerusalem considered changing their name to Beitar Trump Jerusalem Football Club. Ben Giver, as National Security Minister, has expedited gun permitting in order to get thousands of weapons into the hands of his like-minded right. So flagrant that even America almost halted arms delivery. Many of Ben Giver's violent settlers already have American passports, and now they have guns. When Israeli IDF soldiers film themselves beating Palestinians in a rather Abu Ghraib type way, one guy doing social media posts, one soldier, IDF soldier, insists that Yalla Beitar is shouted out by the Palestinian that he's beating in order for him to stop. Yellow and black and the fist is the sign of one of the banned political parties. Signs are hung around Palestinians' necks in the yellow and black saying transfer, referring to a football reference for all Arabs to leave Israel. Beitar Jerusalem La Familia travel around on scooters, motorbikes, all dressed up in black, hoodies with masks. Death to terrorists, death to Arabs, death to the leftists, even, shouted out in a hospital. It isn't going to aid your recovery, is it? Where are the whores of Antifa? Perhaps not surprisingly, La Familia control the racial makeup of the players of their team. Two Chechens that happen to be slightly Muslim were bought by the club but never played a game. In 2008, just 3 years after they were formed, La Familia made up 20% of the crowd. They wave the flag of the Cash party, shouting, "Mohammed is a homosexual." They've sprayed graffiti threatening the life of the Football Association chairman. B'nai Sachim is just one Arab-Israeli club in the Israeli League. That match always results in violence and arrests. Beitar Jerusalem La Familia interrupted the minute silence of the death of Yitzhak Rabin, their own president, and staged a pitch invasion when they were pitted against Maccabi Herzeg because they were seen as too left-wing. Maccabi Herzeg, was the team that ventured to Amsterdam. The treatment of the player Toto Tamuz, a Nigerian Muslim, meant that Beitar had to play behind closed doors more than once. Ibrahim Nadala went the same way as the Chechens, without even being signed. Sporting Charleroi Charleroi, a Belgian team in a Europa League fixture, had their goalkeeper hit by a flare, and the whole game was delayed for really quite some time through the throwing of flares. That's the flaming torches, not the trousers. Qatar La Familia are often identified with tattoos, and the ones without their shirts. Bare-chested. Nearly 10 years ago now. Undercover police were sent to infiltrate La Familia over a 1-month period. This resulted in 56 arrests, including 9 soldiers and 2 minors on suspicion of selling weapons and violence. These are the people that should shouldn't be travelling to France for the France-Israel game at the Parc des Princes, but if you see yellow and black flags or scarves even, you know what might be happening. Tacit is an approach the French like to take. I'm fascinated to see how the new far-right French government plan French gendarme actions and report provocations after the spat against the French dominions and the interior minister. PSG, Paris Saint-Germain, have a lot of Arab supporters, naturally, and very proud they are too. They are likely to be targeted. What Netanyahu have asked Mossad to do on foreign away games after this last week remains to be seen. But really, it's starting to look, shamefully so, that governments are using football hooligans to fight proxy wars of pride. Myself, I have very little interest in football. I tend to say Forest Green Rovers is my team just because they have environmental credentials, because they're zero carbon positive, I think, beyond neutral. I haven't been able to name a Liverpool player for decades, and I'm sort of proud to say that I've never been to a football match. But I am very concerned about current developments and how those current developments are reported. Cancel culture, as I will be for this. But I hope I've been somewhat informative and balanced. Quelqu'un qui m'a dit que tu m'aimes encore, serait-ce possible alors? Tu m'aimes encore, serait-ce possible alors? Serait-ce possible alors?
possible alors.